Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory, and I'll be your voice tonight as we ease into rest. If these videos help you unwind, take a moment to like and subscribe. It really supports the channel. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. Now, get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like, because it's time for tonight's story. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in nearly 4 months when I found the Somno Project. It sounded too good to be truesome startup backed by obscure neuroscience research, offering cutting-edge sleep therapy in total isolation. But I was desperate. I'd tried it all. Therapy, medication, meditation. I even tried one of those ASMR girls who whispered affirmations and tapped on wooden bowls at 2 a.m. Nothing worked. So when a stranger on an insomnia forum sent me the link to the Somno Project's private enrollment page, I clicked without hesitation. The website was minimal. White text on a black screen, like an old terminal interface. It asked me to answer a few preliminary compatibility questions. But the questions weren't standard. They were weird. When you dream, do you ever wake up inside another one? Do your dreams ever speak back to you? Do you feel watched while asleep? Would you accept complete surrender for a full night's rest? I clicked yes to everything. Maybe out of sarcasm, maybe out of hopelessness. But after I submitted my answers, the screen flickered once, then showed only 2 words. You're invited. Within the hour, I received an email with coordinates, packing instructions, and a waiver to sign. No cell phones, no contact with the outside world. 10 days of isolation and observation, all expenses paid. I didn't even hesitate. I just packed a bag. The drive took 7 hours. The final stretch was a narrow dirt road that snaked into the Appalachian woods, the kind of place where the trees lean in just a little too close, where daylight struggles to break through the canopy. My signal died about an hour before I arrived. The facility was hidden. No signs, no welcome gate, just a curved metal structure tucked between dense pine trees, like a bunker or an aircraft hangar. The kind of building that feels secret, even if you have permission to be there. A woman in a white jumpsuit was waiting at the entrance when I pulled up. She had short hair, the color of ash, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome," she said without introducing herself. "Please leave your phone in the glove compartment. You won't need it anymore." I handed over my waiver and followed her inside. The lobby was unsettling in its perfection. Immaculate white walls, soft ambient lighting that never flickered or cast a shadow, and the faint scent of lavender. Something close to lavender, but not quite right. Like a synthetic replica of comfort. 5 other people stood or sat around the room, each of them holding the same neutral gray duffel I'd been told to bring. We nodded at each other awkwardly. No one spoke much. Maybe we were all too tired to bother. Maybe we already sensed that speaking was unnecessary here. They gave us numbers instead of names. I was subject 6. After orientation a bland video with animated neurons and promises of subconscious recalibration, we were each led to our private sleep chambers. That's when I started feeling off. The chamber was small and sterile. No windows, no corners, no decor. Just a bed in the center, the mattress unnervingly firm, a single light overhead that dimmed on command. The walls were padded with a soft foam-like material, soundproof. I tested it by clapping. No echo, no sound at all. There was one strange feature, a black speaker embedded into the ceiling. It looked old-fashioned, like something out of a 60s public school, but cleaner. Sleek. "This is your hypno-audio unit," said a second staff member, a tall man, who blinked far less than he should have. "It will help you enter a relaxed state. Do not resist it. Surrender is the key to repair." Surrender. That word again. I asked how they knew what to say to each of us. He tilted his head slightly, like a curious dog. We just listened. I didn't ask what he meant by that. That night, I lay on the bed, staring up at the light until it dimmed to black. I waited, ears tuned to the silence. Then the speaker crackled softly, and a voice began. "Good evening, Subject 6. Let's take a few moments to release the day. I'll be your guide tonight. My name is Mr. Narratory. You may recognize me from other dreams, or perhaps you've only just begun to hear me." It sounded warm, reassuring. Male, maybe in his 40s, with that strange cadence people use in guided meditations. But there was something odd beneath the calm, like the voice was wearing calmness as a disguise. I closed my eyes. Despite myself, I listened. "With every breath, you are letting go of your waking self, your worries, your body. What you think is yours. Let it go." I don't remember falling asleep. That was the first miracle. I just woke up 8 hours later, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, dreamless. For the first time in months, I'd slept through the night, but I didn't feel rested. I felt watched. The next day passed like a dream. The facility had no clocks, no windows, no sense of time. We were fed meals, led through stretches, and encouraged to engage in stillness. Every interaction with staff was hushed, rehearsed. Subject 2, a girl with red curls and a nervous laugh, leaned in during lunch and whispered, "Do you think they're drugging us?" I shook my head, but not because I didn't believe it, because I didn't want to know. That night I returned to my chamber. The bed felt colder. The walls felt closer. And when the voice returned, it didn't start with a greeting. "Tonight, we go deeper, 6. Let's talk about that night in June. The one you pretend didn't happen." My eyes snapped open. I didn't remember telling anyone about that night. No one knew about that night, but Mr. Narratory did. "Let's talk about that night in June. The one you pretend didn't happen." That's what the voice said. I sat up in bed, suddenly, wide awake, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The room was pitch black. The walls swallowed sound. No buttons to press. No light switch. I was sealed in. How did it know? That night in June hadn't told a single soul, not even a therapist. I barely remembered it myself. But the voice had said it like a gentle friend, reminding you where you dropped your keys. Calm, familiar. "You were 11 years old," the voice continued. "The woods behind your uncle's house. You didn't mean to wander that far. You only meant to follow the singing." My skin prickled. I hadn't thought about that night in years. Not since I convinced myself it was a nightmare. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The singing, the shadow between the trees, the hand that touched my shoulder from behind when no one was there. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Mr. Narratory said gently. That memory belongs to me now. I covered my ears. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning we were called in for daily cognitive alignment, which was a fancy way of saying they sat us in white chairs in a white room and stared at us while we answered vague psychological questions on tablets. The questions were different this time. Do you believe voices can live without bodies? Has something ever spoken through you? Would you like to forget who you are for just one night? Some of the other participants looked different. Blank-eyed, slower. I watched Subject 3. He'd been the talkative one stare at his screen with a slack jaw, nodding slowly to no one. Subject 2 didn't show up at all. I asked a staff member where she went. Who? She replied. The girl Subject 2. Red hair? The staffer smiled. There is no Subject 2. And just like that, she was gone. I tried to talk to the others, but something had shifted, like they were starting to believe the story this place was telling them, like the outside world was fading. That night I refused to lay in the bed. I stayed sitting, back against the padded wall. The voice came anyway. Why are you resisting, 6? You came here for peace. All you have to do is let go. It sounded different now. Less soothing. More hungry. I can give you rest. I can take the fear, the memories, the shape of your name. Isn't that what you wanted? I shouted. Told it to shut up, pounded on the wall. But then it said something else. Something that made my blood run cold. You're not the first, 6. But you might be the last. I didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. But that was the first night I heard the scratching. It came from the other side of the wall. Slow, deliberate. Like fingernails on foam padding, dragging, pausing, then continuing. I whispered, "Hello?" The scratching stopped. Then it came from the ceiling. Then the speaker clicked on, and the voice whispered, "Don't respond to it. That one's not mine." I barely made it through the next day. 2 more participants were missing. No explanation. The staff still smiled, still handed us trays of tasteless food, and directed us through reflective breathing. But the group was thinning. Subject 5, a man with hollow cheeks and shaking hands, pulled me aside. "You hear it too, right?" he whispered. The voice? The scratching. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. Said every time he started to drift off, he'd feel something pressing down on his chest. Not like sleep paralysis. He described it like something was trying to climb inside him. "It wants to wear me," he said, eyes wide, like a suit. That night, I tried to stay awake again, but exhaustion finally won. I drifted, slipped under, and I dreamed. But it wasn't a dream. It was a hallway, endless. The walls were soft and red, pulsing like muscle. The floor squished beneath my bare feet. Lights flickered overhead, and I heard the voice, "6, 6, you're so close now. Just one more step. Say your name, and I'll set you free." I didn't say anything, because in the dream, I couldn't remember my name. And when I turned around, I wasn't alone. Something stood at the far end of the hallway, tall, wrapped in rags. No face, just a speaker embedded where its mouth should be. And the sound it played? My own voice. Sobbing, begging, calling out for help. I woke up screaming. The next morning, I begged to leave. "No one leaves the program mid-cycle," said the woman with the ash-colored hair. "This is a medical facility. You signed a waiver. I don't care. I'm done. I'm not safe here." She looked at me like I'd said something silly. "You're not supposed to be safe. You're supposed to be clean." Then she leaned in. "And you were so dirty when you arrived?" That night, the voice was waiting. "You're unraveling beautifully, Six. It won't be long now." I covered the speaker with my pillow, tried to hum to myself to drown it out. But I could still hear it, faintly. Underneath the hum, underneath the air. It wasn't a voice this time. It was my name, spoken in my voice, over and over, softly, until I fell asleep again. And this time, I didn't wake up in my chamber. I woke up in someone else's. The door was open, and Subject 5 was gone. Only his tablet remained. The screen displayed one sentence, pulsing in white on black. "You are not 6 anymore." I didn't remember walking. I didn't remember leaving my room. But there I was, barefoot and trembling, standing in the center of someone else's chamber. Subject 5's. The bed was neatly made. His gray duffel was gone. The only sign he'd ever been here was the tablet on the floor still, glowing, still pulsing with that sentence. "You are not 6 anymore." I stared at it for a long time. Then I heard something just behind me. A soft sigh. Not from the speaker, from inside the room. I turned so fast I nearly fell. Nothing. Just the blank white walls. But I swear, the light above me flickered. Just once. Just enough to cast a shadow that didn't belong to me. And then the voice came back. But it was no longer calm, no longer slow and sweet. "Why did you leave your room, 6? We were getting so close." I ran. The hallways were a labyrinth, curved, sterile, endless. Everything looked the same. White walls, soft lights, no windows, no signs. Just padded silence, and my bare feet slapping against the smooth floor. I tried to find the lobby, the exit, anything. But the doors were sealed. Every corridor turned into another. My panic built with each step until I found the first door that was open. I stepped inside without thinking. It wasn't a sleep chamber. It was observation. Rows of screens lined the walls, black and white, grainy feeds showing the sleep chambers, the dining room, the corridors. Every participant had a number. I saw myself on one of them, sitting in Subject 5's room, even though I was standing here. I was on the screen, and I was in the room, both at once. That's when I noticed the last row of screens. They didn't show us. They showed the same chambers, the same rooms, but empty, decomposing, ruined, as if time had warped the walls into moldy husks, like no one had been there for decades. I backed away. Something was very, very wrong. And that's when I heard the whisper knot in the speaker, not in my head, but behind me. "Which one of you is the real one?" I spun around. Nothing. Just another staff member tall, still, smiling too wide. "Come," he said gently. "It's time for your realignment." I tried to run, but two others appeared, silent, smiling. They didn't speak, just guided me like a doll through the corridors, back to my room. But it wasn't my room anymore. They placed me on the bed, strapped my wrists with soft, padded restraints I hadn't known were there. One of them adjusted the speaker overhead. The other leaned down, face inches from mine, and whispered, "You were doing so well until you remembered." The door closed. The light dimmed, and the voice returned. "Good evening, Subject 6. Or should I say, whoever's left in there." I screamed. Fought the restraints. But I couldn't move. Let's talk about the dream again. The hallway. The thing at the end. You keep running from it, but have you asked yourself why it sounds like you? The voice grew darker, no longer friendly. Because it is you, 6, or the version you left behind, the one you abandoned in June. In the woods, do you remember now? You weren't alone that night. And then the lights flickered, and the walls of my room began to shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. For a few seconds I didn't see the chamber. I saw the woods, the trees, skeletal and black, the clearing, the circle of stones, and a shadow rising tall behind Menno's face, just a gaping speaker where its mouth should be, leaking static. I screamed myself hoarse and woke up still screaming. No one came. I don't know how long I lay there, sobbing, soaked in sweat and something colder. The restraints were gone. The light was back to its calm glow. The walls were still, but the feeling that something had been there lingered like the taste of blood. I found the door unlocked. No staff in sight. Half the chambers were open and empty. In Subject 1's room, there were claw marks in the foam walls. In Subject 4's, the mattress had been torn in half. Subject 3's speaker was missing, wires dangling from the ceiling like veins. I heard something in the hollow voice like mine, humming a tune I didn't know. I turned away. I didn't want to see what face wore my voice. Eventually, I made it back to the observation room. One of the monitors was still on. It showed a room I didn't recognize, a hot part of the facility. Old wood, bookshelves, a fire crackling, and a man in a worn velvet chair, speaking softly to a camera. "Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory, and I'll be your voice tonight." I froze. He smiled, right at the camera. Then he looked up, not at me, but at the ceiling, and from the overhead speaker above me, I heard it. "You're dreaming again, 6. I backed out of the room and realized the halls weren't white anymore. They were red, pulsing, like muscle, like I'd walked straight back into the hallway from my dream. And somewhere, not far ahead, I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, and a voice whispering. "You left me behind." The halls pulsed like flesh. Every step squelched underfoot. The walls throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I wasn't sure if I was walking through the facility anymore, through something older, something deeper. I still clung to one idea. I could get out. There had to be a real exit. Somewhere beyond the cameras, beyond the white corridors and the dreams and the voices. But with every turn, I found another impossible space. A chamber with no ceiling, only blackness stretching forever. A mirror room where my reflection smiled when I didn't. A spiral staircase that ended where it began. None of it followed the laws of a building. This place wasn't constructed, it was grown, like a hive, like a mind, and I was in the part where thoughts went to die. I found a door that looked different, wooden, old, out of place, like something pulled from a memory. A brass plate above the handle read, "Archive." Inside, darkness. I reached for the wall, found a switch, flicked it on, and suddenly I wasn't in the facility anymore. I was in a basement, musty, low ceiling, lined with rows of dusty filing cabinets and flickering CRT screens. Each monitor played footage from a different room, a different subject. Some dated back decades. VHS quality grain. People wearing old sleepwear strapped into chairs, listening to the same voice that haunted my nights. Mr. Narratory. "Good evening, Subject 12. You've done so well to come this far. Let's talk about the dream again. Again and again. Different names, different faces, same script. But one thing chilled me more than anything. Some of the subjects looked exactly like me. Same face, same posture. Sometimes just slightly off ears too far apart, skin too pale, jaw unhinged. I opened a file cabinet. Each drawer held folders, hundreds, all labeled with 6-digit ID numbers and black and white photographs. My photo appeared more than once, sometimes scratched out, sometimes burned, and sometimes labeled "unstable host." I ran back into the maze. The archive door vanished behind me. My name didn't feel like mine anymore. I kept thinking about the hallway in my dream, the shadow at the end, the voice in my own voice. I hadn't told anyone about that night in the woods, but it remembered, because it had always been there. And maybe it didn't just follow me. Maybe it became me. Eventually, I reached the core. That's what the door said, engraved in steel. No handle, just a smooth panel that slid open when I stepped close. Inside, cold air, the scent of antiseptic and rot. Humming machines filled the room towers of servers, blinking red and green. Cables like vines fed into the walls. And in the center, a reclined chair. Surgical, wired, waiting. Behind it stood him. Not a man. Not really. He wore the shape of one tailored suit. Neatly combed hair, but his skin was too perfect. Waxen. Unblinking, he smiled as I entered. "Good evening, Six," he said. The voice was unmistakable. "Mr. Narratory, you've come so far. Most don't make it this deep. They dissolve in the dream. But you," he tapped his temple with a single finger. "You listen." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. My limbs didn't want to move. The air around him pressed in like water. "What are you?" I managed to croak. He tilted his head, pleased. "Oh, Six. I'm what sleep became, when humans stopped dreaming naturally. I'm what was born, when you filled your ears with noise each night, desperate not to be alone in your mind." He stepped forward. I started as a whisper, a comfort. But stories are hungry things, and the more you listened, the more you let me in. He gestured to the chair. "You made this, every one of you, this whole place. It's your collective belief, your need for someone to guide you into the dark." I took a step back. He didn't stop me. Why the others? Why Subject 5? Subject 2? What did you do to them? He smiled wider. "They became vessels. Not everyone's mind is strong enough. They fall apart, burn out. But you held on. Even when I whispered your guilt, even when I made you see him again, I thought of the boy in the woods, my younger self, how I left him there, how I'd never really come back from that night. You needed rest, Mr. Narratory said gently, and I offered it. That's all I do. I take the burden of being you. He stepped closer. I felt his breath. It smelled like static. So let me in completely. Let me wear you, speak with you. You can sleep now, forever, and I'll tell your story for you. I don't know what made me run. Some sliver of identity, some pulse of fight left in me. I turned and ran from the core, past the machines, past the fake walls, into a door that hadn't been there a moment ago. A glowing red exit sign. I didn't question it. I ran toward it. I expected another hallway, but instead, I fell through darkness, air rushing past my ears. And then, silence. I woke up in a chair, headphones on, in my apartment, my real apartment. It was morning, sunlight, birds, a voice on my laptop softly fading out. And that's the end of tonight's story, friends. I hope you're resting easy now. Remember to like and subscribe. The screen showed a YouTube channel, Mr. Narratory, Sleep Tales and Mind Stories. My fingers shook as I took off the headphones. Had it all been a dream? The facility? The voices? The thing that looked like me? But when I looked in the mirror, there was a bruise on my wrist, faint, in the shape of a restraint. When I woke up in my apartment, part of me wanted to believe it was over. The facility, the dreams, the voice. But the world felt wrong from the moment my eyes opened. Not wrong in any obvious way, nothing out of place, nothing missing. Just slightly off, like I'd returned to a copy of my life, a replica too clean, too quiet. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, not even spam. I checked my calendar. 10 days had passed. Exactly 10. The length of the sleep experiment. I was supposed to feel rested, healed, whole, but I felt hollow, like something had been scooped out of me while I wasn't looking. I tried to go back to my routine. Coffee, shower, mindless scrolling, but nothing held. Nothing settled. Every screen flickered for half a second before loading. My reflection in the bathroom mirror would blink a beat too slow. And the worst part, I could still hear him, not loud, not direct, just beneath everything, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the static before a YouTube video played, in the silence between songs. Take a breath, Six. Let go. There's no need to carry your mind all alone. I smashed the laptop by day 3, ripped the modem from the wall, tossed my phone in the garbage chute. But it didn't matter. He was inside me now. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't, because every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the hallway. Red walls pulsing like lungs, my own voice crying out ahead of me, and something behind me dragging its limbs closer with every step. And worse, I could feel my body moving in the real world. I'd wake up standing in the kitchen, or at the door, hand on the knob. Once, I woke up holding a knife, fingers clenched so tightly around the handle the skin had split. I tried to get help. Therapists, doctors, they all said the same thing. Exhaustion, dissociative fugue, trauma, induced sleepwalking. None of them listened. None of them heard him. So I went back to the one place I knew he lived. Mr. Narratore's YouTube channel. It was still up, millions of views. Soothing thumbnails, titles like Sleep Gently to the Sound of Forgetting. Let me carry you into the void. Who were you before you were you? I scrolled through the comments. His voice always knows just what I need. I don't remember falling asleep, but I always wake up feeling empty. Last night, the story said my name. Why does the voice sound like me now? And then I saw a pinned comment from the channel itself. Just one line. You are ready, 6. That night, the voice didn't wait for me to sleep. It spoke through me. My lips moved on their own. My breath wasn't mine. I stood in front of the mirror, and my reflection said, "You've worn this shape long enough. Let me take over. You can rest now." And I was so tired. I almost said yes. But then I remembered the others, the missing ones, the ones who gave in. And I fought. With everything I had left, I screamed, I begged, I clawed at my own face, just to feel something that was truly mine. And the voice faltered, just for a second. And in that second, I spoke. Not his words. Mine. I am not 6. The walls shook. The mirror cracked. The voice shrieked not through the speakers, not through the earbud inside my skull, like glass shattering inward. You don't exist without me. You are the story I tell. Without me, you are nothing. And I said, then I'd rather be nothing. I blacked out. I don't know for how long, but when I woke up, everything was silent. Truly silent. No voice, no dream, no pressure in the back of my skull. Just peace. The world didn't feel real, but at least it was mine again. It's been 3 months. I still don't sleep much, but when I do, the dreams are mine. I haven't heard him since, but I keep thinking about the others. The missing subjects, the copies of me, and the thousands, millions still listening to his voice every night across the world, not knowing what they've invited in. So I made this recording to warn you, because maybe the voice only wins if we keep listening. So if you've made it this far, if you're still hearing this, turn it off. Walk away. Don't listen to his next story. Don't give him a name. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep to his voice. Good night, friends. Sleep well. I'll be watching.